How do you know if you are an emotional eater? To be totally honest, almost every person alive has eaten when they're sad or eaten to celebrate something, so have eaten in response to an emotion. I think we all do it at one point or another. But where is that line? Where does it be an occasional thing and then it becomes a problem and it becomes something that starts to dominate your life? I don't have the exhaustive answers, but I can share with you as a lifelong emotional eater and as an emotional eating coach and someone who's in her fifth year of recovery from emotional eating. I can just tell you what I've experienced, and maybe it'll resonate with you and maybe it'll help. If anything, I hope that it helps you feel less alone, because that is the one thing that I struggled with. Was I felt like I was the only person who was so messed up when it came to how I thought about food. So I'm going to go over the 5 things that I think led me to recognize and realize that I was an emotional eater. So the first one, the first thing was I thought about food all day long. Every moment of every day, all I thought about was food. It was the thing I thought about when I woke up in the morning. And honestly, when I woke up in the morning, I was usually pretty nauseated because I had eaten right up until I had gone to bed. And so I woke up and I wasn't really hungry and I felt nauseated and I was disgusted with myself. And I usually felt fat. And so that was a constant. And then it was the thought of, okay, when am I going to allow myself to eat? Because I knew, and this leads to number 2, and I will get there, but once I started eating, that would cascade and lead into more behaviors that I had no control over. And so that was a huge problem to trying to decide, well, when do you start eating? So consequently, I was a teacher for 17 years. And as much as my day revolved around teaching my students, it also revolved around, what am I going to have at lunch? What am I going to eat when I get home? When's my next meal going to come? It was constant chatter about food all the time, all the time. And I could not turn that volume down to save my life. It just kept playing. So that leads to number 2. And the second thing that happened, the second thing that made me realize that I was truly an emotional eater, because I just thought I was messed up with food. I didn't really identify it as an emotional eater. The second thing was once I started eating, I couldn't stop. And that's why I said I'd eat right up until I went to bed. Going to bed was the only thing that stopped me from eating. I would eat constantly, all the time. Right up from when I came home from school until I went to bed, I would eat constantly. A lot of times I would hardly eat anything at school, or I'd be super controlled I'd bring my lunch and I wouldn't eat anything. And then I would get home and I would be so excited about being home because I wasn't at school anymore. And I'd be so excited. And then the fear would come in. The fear would come in like a wave, and it'd be like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? How are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? And once I started, it just kept going. And to add on to the first thing that I talked about, that my mind was always on food, y'all, all I watched was the Food Network. I was obsessed with food. I thought about food all the time. And so I watched food shows all the time. I watched the Food Network constantly. I learned how to bake on the Food Network. I learned how to cook on the Food Network. I went so far as to have a baking business. It's another thing, another reason to just obsess about food. Start a baking business. That's what you need to do as an emotional eater. That's what I did. So all of these things, in the moment when I was in it, didn't have a clue, didn't even know what was going on. But as I step back and I take that 30,000 foot view, I'm able to see, aha, okay, I see what was really going on. Being able to go a long period of time without food or be very controlled. But once I allowed myself to fully engage with food, it was on, and it was going to be on until something stepped in to make it go away. And that was usually having to go to sleep because I had to get up. I had to go to work. And so I would wake up feeling so nauseated because I would eat right up until I went to bed. And that's so unhealthy, but it's just such a sickening feeling to wake up and know that you have overeaten and that you just have this pit in your stomach. And that would lead to number three. The third thing that made me realize that I was an emotional eater and that this was a real problem was when I would wake up on those mornings, I would shame myself. I would ridicule myself. I would call myself names. I just was so unkind to myself, so unkind to myself. And the only way that I could get myself back on track was if I would starve myself. And so I wouldn't eat. If I had overeaten, I wouldn't eat. So a lot of times I'd wake up in the morning, I would feel totally nauseated. So I would go all day without eating. And then I'd come home and I'd start the whole cycle again. But at least I would feel okay during the school day because I was restraining myself. I was holding myself back. I was being good. And that would allow me to be able to get through my day. That would allow me to be able to mentally and emotionally get through my day because I was telling myself how good I was because I wasn't eating. And the reality was I was just punishing myself and just being so incredibly unkind to myself. And so and again, we're talking about years and years of this, probably from the time that I was in high school. And it started long before that, but it really became more ritualized when I was in high school, all the way until I was in my late 40s. And the things I would say about myself and the ways that I would treat myself is just deplorable. I have to remind myself of that and I have to remember it. And so deep into self-loathing that I didn't see any other option. I had options. I just didn't see them. And part of that is why I'm talking to you about this and why I have this channel is because I didn't feel like anybody would understand. I was so mortified. I was so embarrassed by my eating behaviors. And I knew that if anybody found out, why would they ever want to be friends with me? Why would they ever want to have me in their life? Why would anyone want to date me? I don't think I ever could date somebody because they would find out how messed up I was with food. And so I kept it so under wraps. So many people nobody knew about it. It was so locked down because I was so ashamed and so embarrassed and just knew that I had to do something. I had to do something, but that was part of the problem too. The fourth thing that I discovered that gave me that light bulb moment of being an emotional eater was that I had no control of my moods. I had no control of my emotions. I flew off the handle. I was so reactionary. Everything was a crisis. Jill, I could be so mean. I could be so mean, and not just when I was hungry or not just after I had overeaten, because that's when you feel the worst and you can just be so unkind to people. But it was something that just became such the norm that I couldn't differentiate between when I felt good and when I didn't feel good. And the constant negative self-talk just became the norm. That became the regular talk that I exhibited. And everything became so dramatic. Everything became so just a mountain of emotion. And that was a real strike to me that there is something so much deeper to this than me just not feeling good about myself or me just wanting to lose a couple pounds because I felt like I had overeaten or whatever the situation was. There was so much more to it than that. And I didn't know what it was though. I didn't know. I knew it was there, but I didn't know what it was. So then the last thing was that my relationship with food and how I felt about food became so toxic and became this perpetual love-hate relationship where if I was not eating, I loved food. I could fantasize about food. I could watch food on TV. But if I allowed it to have its foot in the door and I started eating, oh my gosh, then all of a sudden I hated it. And I hated myself because I couldn't control myself around it. And it was when in the span of an hour or two, My relationship with food went back and forth, up and down, upside down, because I hated it. I loved it. I obsessed about it. I thought it was disgusting, all of those things. And my thoughts and my feelings were so out of control that it was scary. And I knew something had to change, because I knew I could not continue to live like this, because one, no one would want to be around me. I didn't want to be around myself. That was the biggest thing. So that was when I really realized that I've got to see somebody. I've got to start getting some information about this and figuring out what the heck I am doing and how much longer do I think I can live my life like this. If any of what I have told you today, if any of this has resonated with you and you feel like, oh my gosh, do you know me? If you feel like I have just relayed to you your life story or a part of your story, stick around for more videos like this. I have lots of suggestions and lots of things that I use when I coach other people, and I still coach myself. Do not get me wrong. Emotional eating for me will be a lifelong struggle. It will be something I will always work on. I will work on it every single day, because I know there's an addictive property to it that's going to keep me coming back. And I need to make sure that I keep myself in the best place that I possibly can to have the best relationship with myself, with food, and with others. So again, if this has resonated with you, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and let's connect on the ups and downs of emotional eating, but also what you can do right now to make things better, to start to improve things, to take those little baby steps, those 1% steps that will move you forward. That's what I want for you, because I always want it for myself, and I want to continue to work on that too. But I know that I was given this situation because I was supposed to figure it out, and then I was supposed to tell other people about it. I just know that. I just know that because it turned my life upside down and inside out. And I know that I'm supposed to be able to share this with people, because I don't want anyone to live with the pain that I lived with for so many years. So if that's you, let's hang out. All right? Take care.